All right. Did you guys all have lunch? Did you all have a glass of wine? All right, you should have a glass of wine very soon. Okay, so I love that my front row people are the wine drinkers. We are going to have a great time. All right, so I am Janice Fraser. I think I'm going to close that door because we're going to fight with each other. Fight, fight. Okay. So I want to talk about design and innovation, and mostly innovation. And here's why I want to talk about innovation. It's because I keep getting placed in these moments in time where something interesting is happening, something that's really profoundly changing the world around us. The first experience that I had like that was at Netscape. I joined Netscape about 6 months after their IPO, which today sounds like, really late to the party, right? Like, wow, after the IPO. But at that time, IPOs and all of this were not quite as, old school as they are today. I was employee number 750 at Netscape. Netscape was, for those of you who are too young and were not born yet, Netscape was the first public web browser, really. It's the thing that made the internet happen for all of us. And Netscape, I was there only for 14 months. It was the craziest thing. When I started, we were jammed 750 people into 2 buildings. And when I left 14 months later, 16 months later, something like that, depending on how you count, there were 35 buildings. 35, from 2 buildings down in Silicon Valley to 35. It was a huge transformation. It was an amazing time. We were changing the world. So I got to see what that was like. What is it like to be part of a radical cultural shift? And I liked it, so I kept going. Later on, so that was 96, 95, 96. Later on, I started a company called Adaptive Path, which is still around today. It was arguably the first user experience company in the world. We were 7 partners, all of us dedicated to doing user experience practice in some form or another. So I was one of those 7 founders. I was there for 6 years, and I was the company's first CEO. And that was a really amazing time, because before that, user experience didn't really exist as a practice, and now we have awards and galas, and it is so well known and well understood that many people think UX is passé and that we should all be called product designers, and that the term UX is perhaps archaic. I don't happen to agree, but I certainly appreciate the conversation. Then I started a thing called LUXr about 4 years ago, and when I left Adaptive Path, I really stepped out of the user experience community because I am at my heart an entrepreneur, and it was my entrepreneurship kind of that brought me to UX. And so it was time for me to actually start companies that were potential scale targets, right? So I went out and I raised a bunch of capital and I did all of that. And that's the community that I've been participating in and in some ways a leader of for the last several years. I was part of the lean startup movement. Lean UX is a term that I actually said first. If it wasn't me, it would have been somebody else. But so that was my third moment of seeing a profound change in how we approach something. And each one of these moments has really given me a lot of pause and helped me to look at the nature of innovation. So that's where I want to go. I'm currently at Pivotal Labs. The whole LUXr team was merged into Pivotal Labs, and there we are building out. So Pivotal's known as an excellent extreme programming shop. For the last 2 years, they've been building out a design and product management practice under people like Drew McManus and Tim McCoy, who some of you may know from Cooper. And so I'm bringing the innovation component to that. So it's a really exciting time to be at Pivotal as well. And if you are looking for a new opportunity, you might be surprised that Pivotal is a great place to be a designer. So if you're interested, keep in touch. I am at CleverGirl on Twitter. I'm clevergirl@gmail.com. I'm a terrible correspondent, but I tend to reply to my Twitters, so please do keep in touch. So I am notorious for going over time. I would love it if someone would volunteer to keep time. Can I get a volunteer hand? Somebody? I'm going to not talk until somebody raises a hand. Awesome, thank you. Okay, so it's 25 minutes, and I probably already am 3 minutes in, so give me a high sign at 5, and then when I'm done. Great. So I'm going to start with a series of statements that I happen to believe, and then I'm going to go into one case study with some specific ideas about how innovation happens. And the first statement is that I believe that leadership and user experience is certainly more than faithful execution of best practices. Like, you can implement excellent best practices in your user experience and still not have good user experience. You can do the process and not have a great product. And more than that, executing on current best practices is not advancing the field because it is simply codifying what is rather than really thinking about where we need to go next. So innovation means that you have to step beyond that. So I believe that it's a much higher calling, that really what we're doing is manifesting the world as we wish it were. And this is something that I do love about designers and hate about designers, is that we're all really impatient. We're impatient with the status quo. We imagine the world as it ought to be. And leadership and user experience, I believe, is very much about imagining a future world. And the other talk right now that's going on is about some speculative design work that I thought was really lovely. I'm so glad that they made it as a finalist. So it's about manifesting the world as you wish it were. And that means that you need to do thought experiments, particularly coming from the kind of codified innovation area. You're supposed to build, measure, learn, and all of these lean startup things, which I absolutely believe in. But I also believe that part of that build, measure, learn, lean startup, lean user experience kind of culture is doing things just for the sole purpose of learning. Just for the purpose of learning. Which is why I was so glad to see a company like Method take the bold step of doing a thought experiment around money, which is what they're talking about in the other room. It's about observing to see the next improvement. So we are all careful observers, and part of imagining the better future is really watching thoughtfully and being quiet and just seeing what is. Often I'm annoyed by designers. I do love design, the design community, but there is so much emphasis placed on nuance and subtlety, which obviously I love. But sometimes I think that the emphasis on nuance and subtlety forgets that we also must be very bold. And bold plus subtle is a really interesting place. And so this is why I love what Virgin has done. They're another finalist. I'm very excited to see their talk this afternoon. So being bold as well as being subtle. And then standardizing what we've learned, because this gives us some leverage, some time. So if I don't have to rethink everything, then I can use that found time to think about some really, really hard things. And this gets us to another one of our finalists, which is the Google Surface design entry, which I thought was really profound. It's a really important moment. It's something we've all been waiting for. I actually thought it would come from Apple, but who knew it came from Google, so good on them. All right, so innovation. Innovation is a very big word. Do you get the pun? It's a very big word. Very big word. So the question is, how do you make manifest an innovation? You can have innovative thinking, innovative process, whatever, but how do you make a thing? And over all of this time that I've been pondering the concepts around innovation, I don't see it so much as a process. There's no innovation process that I think really will get you to think differently and to see that bold new world. I think instead there are some patterns maybe that could perhaps become a framework. And that pattern goes like this, that there's some set of constraints. What would it be like to have a phone without a keyboard, right? That's an interesting constraint. It's provocative. So then the second thing is a provocation. Sometimes that provocation can be explicit, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then you have to attempt it. You have to actually try something. And then you see what happens, and you watch with beginner's mind and put away your assumptions about what ought to be and look at what is. And so the example that I want to give you is not at all a classic user experience case study. It's not about digital design at all. It's about the school and the mission. That is absolutely one of the happiest places on earth. Forget Walt Disney. He had nothing on Brightworks. Brightworks is absolutely, doing the slides for this talk, almost I was choked up most of the time that I was pulling the screens off of Flickr because I think it is such an amazing place. So let's think about what a school is. We all know a school. A school has a school building, and you go in and there are some hallways and lockers. Those hallways lead to classrooms. The classrooms are organized into clusters of desks, or perhaps there are tables, and those classrooms each represent a grade level. This is a 3rd grade classroom, so the grade level. And in front of that classroom is a teacher. This teacher is getting her classroom ready after a Christmas break to come back, and that teacher is doing yeoman's work, really, making a huge contribution to the community. And those teachers lead our children through a learning process that is assessed through tests. And we really love our tests, so there are lots of them. And we study for those tests in these quiet places that are highly structured. And so that's a classic educational environment in the United States, whether it's a private school or a public school. It's going to look more or less something like this most of the time. And ultimately, all of that is evaluated for quality through these grades. And standardized testing is something I'm not going to address because that's such a huge political fight, but you can probably imagine how I feel about that. So what are the structures that we see in education system now? We see buildings and hallways and classrooms and desks, teachers, grade levels, tests, grades. And as a constraint, what if we took all of that infrastructure away? What if you had a school with no classes, no grade levels, no grades, no teachers, no formal evaluations really of any kind? Not even a freestanding school building. What would that be like? And then, when you take all of that away, you have to start again with a provocation, with this idea of well, how do children learn? What's left? Well, what's left is, how do children learn? How can we reinvent? So you take away what is known, and you re-ask the question as a provocation. And this idea of constraints and provocation and the idea of Brightworks is the invention of this man, Gaver Tully. I know that Gaver did not invent constraints. Don't send me an email. And he's listening right now to some sort of kooky musical instrument made out of found parts at his booth at the Maker Faire. I first saw Gaver Tully do a talk at TED in 2000, and I'm going to say 8 maybe, when it was still in Monterey. I was very fortunate to watch him, and at the time he had a project called the Tinkering School, which is a summer camp where he allows children to do all sorts of dangerous things like carry pocket knives and use chop saws. And he's been doing this with little kids for a long time and watching them and observing how children learn. This is his happy place. His happy place is not standing on the big stage at TED. His happy place is here interacting with kids. And I am honored to say that Gaver has become a good friend, and we've had a lot of conversations about the pedagogical approach at Brightworks because my child has been there for 4 years. So this is what Gaver learned about how children learn and how that learning might be turned into a curriculum. And you can see that this is his sketch. He would sketch this over and over. If you go on Flickr, you can find 15 different versions of the sketch over the years as it evolved. So his idea is that children learn by exploring all sorts of things. So if you give them a topic like wind, and you give them several weeks to explore it, then you can have a lot of time to explore the topic and ignite curiosity, which could then lead into some very consciously connected, this is what we want for our kids, right? We want them to consciously connect with the content, right? So by observing for years what children do and giving it a try in a small scale at Tinkering School, he was able to develop this concept, this very, very innovative concept, which throws away all of classic curriculum organization and school standards. Not standards in the standards way. Standards in the it's a school building with a classroom and all of that. And I'll show you in a moment what that looks like in practice. So he had these ideas, and this next thing, so you've got your constraints, you've got your provocation, now you need to make an attempt. And his first attempt was Tinkering School, but I want to focus on Brightworks because it's here in San Francisco, and it's now 4 years old. So they've had many shots on goal to see if they can do something really special. And so here's Gaver. In the new space, this is the warehouse in the Mission. It's at Mariposa and Bryant. And this is, beginning of remodeling to make this old mayonnaise factory into a school. And so here you can see one of the students at the beginning of the build. So this is actually the new school building. Doesn't look anything like a classic school building. This is about week 5 of the very first school year. Week 3 of the very first school year. Right? So this is where Gaber was standing first. This is where that kid with the thing was standing. So instead of having classrooms, they created half walls and created loosely defined areas, and they had a very small number of students, about 25 students that first year. Over time, they built it out. Really interesting things started to show up. Behind this very interesting architectural modular thing is a Cork Floor where you can have unstructured time and playtime for the little ones. It's a K-12 school, which is really interesting. You can see someone's lounging right there. Totally different kind of concept for a physical space of a school. This picture was taken about 3 weeks ago as they were getting set up for the new school year. So all of this build out gets redone every year based on the changing needs of the school, and this is the only permanent structure now inside the space. This was taken day before yesterday. They got this big public open space. This was shortly after the lunchtime. A group of kids were hanging this huge thing. So this is one of they don't have teachers, they have collaborators. We'll talk more about that. This is the collaborator, that's my son. Now it's hung up. One of the things that he does is they hack the space. They redo the space all the time throughout the school year to meet the changing needs of the students. This is a set of pipes in this cubby that's been turned into this amazing library, and each of the pipes has been renamed about books, right? This is all about love of books. So this is where heroes go, and this is the villains, right? And this is a point of view, and this is the denouement. And so by having this non-traditional environment, they can hack it to make it more interesting for the kids who are going there and to provoke. This is a provocation for the kids. I love this. Stories. So we have ideas, stories, writers, and hard work. That's what those say. So instead of teachers, we have collaborators, and it's more than just a semantic difference. A teacher's role is to educate, it's broadcast, and it's collaborative, but it's broadcast more than it is collaborative. The collaborator's job is to provoke the children of all ages. This is the high schoolers. That kid is about to learn how to drive. To provoke the kids to think about problems and to become nimble problem solvers. So here, one of our collaborators is talking about the problem web. Right? So we've gotten rid of the school building as it is. We've gotten rid of the hallways with the lockers. We've gotten rid of the teachers. Right? And what is the effect of that? So this is another one of the collaborators. Look at this library experience compared to a different library experience. This is very innovative and interesting. And what happens, the end result is this intense curiosity. Intense curiosity. When have you seen a group of 13-year-olds look at something so intently? And what I want you to see is that that's the director of the school. That's Gaber's partner, business partner, Ellen, and she's deeply engaged with these kids, but she's not there telling them what they ought to be seeing. She's allowing them to get the information and get the knowledge on a pull basis. So more pictures of deeply, deeply engaged kids. And part of what happened when they got rid of all of that infrastructure is they created what they're calling a learning community, and it really is a learning community. Every time I go in, I feel inspired. And this is, every Friday they have a community lunch. So this is that very messy common space where my son was hanging that thing. This is it set up for community lunch, which is prepared by one of the families. Each person gets a name, place. So often this is a teenager, and this is a 6-year-old. And what's really interesting is the calming effect that little ones, that multi-age rooms have on nasty, nasty teenagers. So nothing calms a teenager like brushing the hair of a 6-year-old. So there's one of the families talking about the lunch they had just prepared. You've got multi-age, so the teachers are embedded with the kids are at multi-age tables. It's very lovely. Right. Here's an example of one of the teenagers. This is the kid that's about to learn to drive, hanging out with a bunch of third graders. So then this point about watching what happens very closely is really not lost on the innovators at Brightworks. So this is the collaborators after the first week of school sitting down and having a reflection about what's going well, what's going poorly, what do we need to think about, what ideas did we try that didn't work, in this particular configuration, what do we need to adjust? And they actually practice what they preach, right? So this is a Kanban board. If any of you are familiar with Kanban, it's a common agile practice. And this says to do, in process, and done. And those of us who are interested in extreme programming or some of these other software design methods, this makes my heart sing. I taught them how to do this 3 years ago. Makes me really happy. And upon reflection, they do all sorts of things, like they move where the library is and they clean out all the books. This is a couple of collaborators having a great time as they're moving the library. Over time, how am I on time? 1 minute. Damn, you're hard. Oh, no, he's my timekeeper. Yeah, 5. So if you're going to keep my time, you got to be here the whole time, man. All right. So the Brightworks learning arc over time has gotten clarified and codified and illustrated beautifully. It's a little washed out here, but it's a lovely thing. And what you get is this illustration really helps us to see, like, what is the cool thing that happened right here that allowed that child to go really, really deep on a topic. And that's the kind of effect that this innovative approach to school making has created. The kids end up with a sense of agency. So the outcome of this innovative approach, so by agency I mean the kids feel powerful to affect their own reality. This is a project from the very first year. The very first thing they did is said, okay, kids, where would you want to store your things? Where would you want to spend time? And they used that as a jumping off point for cities. So that first learning arc was about cities. So they made Kid City. So the kids designed, they had an architect approve the plans, but designed their own space. They took the nicest, sunniest spot in the school, they designed their own city, and they built it. So the children constructed this themselves, K-12, constructed this city themselves with the help of their collaborators. I love this. This was one of the side projects that the kids did once, a couch swing. So ultimately, the innovation at Brightworks is a learning community designed to make better humans. This is the start of the day. That's the school educational architect, Gaver Tully, who I mentioned before, on his birthday. And what they're doing is they're putting sticky notes all over Gaver. Every child does this. On their birthday, people write appreciations, write lovely things about that person, and then cover them in sticky notes. And every kid gets a pad of paper, and they write down the good things, and then they cover them in sticky notes. So you're stuck there in the middle of the circle getting appreciated all over the place. It's really, really a lovely tradition. So this framework of innovation, constrain, provoke, attempt, observe, works. I've seen it work in a number of different environments, and this Brightwork example is only one. And they also use it to teach the kids. So the topic of each arc, whether it's wind or in this case it was clocks, is a constraint. Then they provoke the kids. Isn't this a gorgeous picture? That is actually one of our students. She's just lovely. The provocation is to put something interesting into the path of the kids and see where their excitement goes. Where is that thing that allows them to take the left turn and really swoop in on some topic of their interest? Then attempt, they make a try at something. This girl is making an orrery, which is the model of the planets where there's the sun in the middle, and then the earth spins around the sun, and then the moon spins around the earth, and it's all proportionate, and she actually did that. Like, how awesome is that for a 4th grade project? This girl was given a challenge. Her constraint was to make a marble run that took exactly 13 and a half seconds. So when I look at how projects are currently undertaken in the software world, this still happens, and it makes me feel dead inside. This makes my heart sing. So I want more innovation, please. Thank you very much.